It's not an accident that this message has found you. At this exact hour, in this exact moment, you are hearing words that were never meant for everyone, only for those who were called. Somewhere deep inside you already feel it. The strange stirring that began days ago, the sense that something was shifting in the unseen world, was not your imagination. It was a summons. And now the message has reached you. Across Jerusalem, beneath the ancient stones of the Temple Mount, whispers began to spread of a covenant sealed in silence, written not by human hands alone, but guided by something greater. Those who were there say a light passed over the old city just before dawn, a golden shimmer that touched the highest dome and vanished as quickly as it came. Hours later, a single parchment surfaced, its language older than Hebrew, its markings pulsing faintly like breath beneath ink. They call it the Jerusalem Covenant. For centuries, prophets spoke of a moment when heaven would send out a call to the scattered hearts of the faithful. Not through thunder or fire, but through quiet recognition, when a person would hear something, see something, or feel something, and just know, this is meant for me. You are one of them. The timing is not coincidence. It is alignment. What began in Jerusalem is unfolding now, and this message is the proof that the covenant's reach has found its next bearer. As you listen, remember this is not a story of the past. It is an awakening of the present. If you are still here, still watching, then the seal has already recognized you. And from this point on, nothing about your journey will ever be ordinary again. Under the dim glow of the morning sun, the city of Jerusalem stirred, unaware that something ancient had been uncovered beneath its sacred stones. It began with a quiet excavation led by a small team of scholars near the southern wall. Routine work, they said, restoring pathways and cataloguing fragments of old scrolls. But on that morning, one of the workers' tools struck a thin plate of gold, sealed within layers of rock. At first, they thought it was a simple artifact, another remnant of the Second Temple period. Yet when the plate was lifted, a faint pulse of warmth ran through it, and the air seemed to thicken around the team. The archaeologist in charge, a man known for his skepticism, later described it as if time itself paused for a heartbeat. Etched into the surface was an inscription unlike anything they had seen before. Words written in a script that predated known Semitic languages, wrapped in geometric patterns that matched none of the ancient orders. And at the bottom, 3 symbols stood out in brilliant detail: a flame, an eye, and a circle enclosing the city of Jerusalem. They called it the Jerusalem Covenant. No one knows who gave it that name first. Some say it was a journalist who heard rumors of its existence. Others say one of the rabbis whispered it in prayer after glimpsing the inscription. But what made this discovery extraordinary was not only its physical form, it was what followed. Within hours, reports began to circulate among spiritual leaders across Israel that the covenant contained prophecies aligning perfectly with ancient scrolls stored deep within the archives of the old city. Passages from Isaiah, Daniel, and Ezekiel seemed to echo its meaning, that a moment would come when the earth would be called to remembrance, when those chosen to carry light would awaken as one. The words on the golden plate were not just symbolic. They appeared to form a direct continuation of those older prophecies, as if finishing a sentence begun thousands of years ago. Scholars were baffled. The metal was pure, without tarnish or corrosion, as though untouched by time. No tool marks, no evidence of casting or engraving, and yet the letters seemed alive, changing subtly depending on the angle of light. Some witnesses swore the flame symbol flickered, while others said the circle shimmered like water. But the most unsettling detail was the faint hum that filled the chamber when the plate was brought into open air. It was not mechanical or electrical. It was harmonic, resonant, like a single sustained note that vibrated inside the chest rather than the ear. The archaeologists called in technicians to measure it, but every recording device failed to capture the sound. Only human perception could sense it, as if the tone existed on the border between the physical and the spiritual. As the story spread, religious authorities stepped in to contain the discovery. The plate was transferred to a secure chamber beneath the Temple Institute, and access was restricted. Yet information still leaked. Anonymous sources claimed that a portion of the inscription had been translated. The words, they said, spoke of the gathering of witnesses and the awakening of those marked by remembrance. Another line, partially damaged, mentioned a covenant written before the foundation of the world, suggesting something older than creation itself. To some it was poetry, to others it was instruction. But to those who felt called by the message, it was destiny. Soon after, unusual phenomena began to occur around the city. Pilgrims visiting the Western Wall reported subtle tremors underfoot, though no seismic activity was recorded. Priests in churches across the old city spoke of candles relighting themselves after being extinguished. Even skeptical tourists found themselves standing still in tears for no apparent reason, overcome by emotion. Something intangible had shifted. An atmosphere, a current, a sense of expectancy that seemed to hang over Jerusalem like unseen fire. Across the world, similar murmurs began to surface. In Rome, a group of monks claimed to have seen an identical flame symbol appear in condensation on a chapel window. In Cairo, an imam reported hearing a low tone reverberating through the minarets during the dawn call to prayer. And in a small monastery in Ethiopia, a sealed jar long kept in the archives was found split open, revealing parchment fragments that bore the same circle and eye insignia as the golden plate. Each event was isolated, unexplainable, and yet every time it coincided with the exact same moment on the clock, 11:11, Jerusalem time. The realization spread like lightning through theological circles. Could this be the fulfillment of the so-called covenant of return, an ancient prophecy whispered among mystics for centuries? According to the texts of old, the covenant would reappear not as punishment, but as invitation. It would call not just one nation, but all hearts attuned to its frequency to remember the promise made long ago, that light would not abandon the earth. Prophets had spoken of it in fragments, each from their own tradition, but now it seemed those fragments were joining into one unified thread. And so, a question began to echo through cathedrals, mosques, synagogues, and temples alike. What is the Jerusalem covenant truly asking of us? Some believed it signified the return of divine presence to the world, the rekindling of direct connection between heaven and humanity. Others warned it could be a test, a revelation meant only for those prepared to respond. Whatever the truth, one thing was undeniable: the discovery had awakened something global. People began gathering nightly at sacred sites, lighting candles, whispering prayers of readiness. The hum that once resonated beneath the stones of Jerusalem now seemed to hum within hearts everywhere. And in that resonance lay the hidden message. The covenant was not merely written on gold, it was written on those who could hear its call. For those who felt it, there was no going back. The message had reached them, and like a spark catching dry wood, it was spreading unstoppable. What began as an archaeological mystery had become a living revelation, and those who stood before it understood that the time of passive belief had ended. The covenant had been uncovered not to be studied, but to be answered. After the discovery of the Jerusalem covenant, the hum that once echoed only beneath the temple began to resonate far beyond the city walls. It spread without announcement or explanation, crossing oceans and borders, weaving through lives of ordinary people who could not understand why they suddenly felt as if someone or something was calling their name. In small towns and crowded capitals, men and women awoke from sleep at the same hour, hearts pounding, eyes wet, hearing the same untraceable tone that scientists could not record. They spoke of a sound that was not heard by the ear but felt in the bones. Within days, stories began to surface from 7 regions of the world, each carrying a report that matched the others in detail so precise that it could not be dismissed as coincidence. The press began to call them the 7 voices. The first came from the deserts of Sinai, where a group of monks reported a vibration that rippled through the sand like the echo of a buried bell. The second was recorded in the highlands of Peru, where shepherds said the sky flickered silver for a moment and the flocks froze as if listening to a distant choir. In Tokyo, entire subway stations fell silent when the same hum rolled through the tunnels. Witnesses said that for those few seconds, every electronic device on the platform dimmed, yet no circuits failed. In Canada, the northern lights intensified into a column of gold that appeared not to move but to breathe. And from Ethiopia, a radio station broadcasting the morning prayer went dead for exactly 1 minute, replaced by what listeners described as a single sustained note, like a trumpet that never ended. In Jerusalem, the hum returned stronger than before, reverberating through the temple walls so that anyone nearby could feel their heartbeat synchronizing to its rhythm. The seventh voice came last, from within the earth itself, recorded by seismologists who found a pattern of micro-vibrations forming what appeared to be language encoded in frequency. Religious leaders, linguists and physicists tried to interpret it. Some believed it was the resonance of the covenant itself, a divine response to its unveiling, spreading across creation like a living signal. Others dismissed it as atmospheric interference, but even the skeptics admitted that the timing was too exact, the coordination too perfect. When the events were mapped on a globe, the 7 sites formed a geometric pattern that aligned precisely with ancient pilgrimage routes known in Hebrew mysticism as paths of return. Scholars noticed that the points also mirrored the 7 menorah flames depicted in the oldest drawings found near the Dead Sea. It was as if the earth itself was relighting those flames. One after another, across continents, the media exploded with speculation. Documentaries were filmed, and debates raged across universities. But outside the noise of analysis, something quieter and far more profound began to happen. Those who had felt the hum within them, those who had heard what others could not, started finding each other. It began online through simple posts. Did anyone else feel that sound? Within hours, threads filled with thousands of responses from every language, every nation. People shared dreams of a woman clothed in light walking through the temple, of golden letters hovering in the sky, spelling one word: awaken. Many had never heard of the Jerusalem covenant before, but every single one described the same unshakable impression that they had been summoned. In the days that followed, gatherings formed in cities and fields, not organized by any church or movement, but by instinct. No one claimed leadership, no one dictated creed. Yet everywhere the gatherings looked the same. People met in silence first, then began to sing, not rehearsed hymns, but spontaneous tones that harmonized perfectly, as if they had known the melody forever. Witnesses said the air itself shimmered when they sang, and that the hum returned, blending with human voices until there was no separation between sound and soul. Journalists filmed these moments, but the recordings failed to capture the resonance. The sound existed only in the moment of participation, vanishing the instant disbelief entered the room. Amid the wonder, fear began to rise. Some governments, uneasy with the mass gatherings, called for investigation. Rumors spread that the covenant was a hoax or an instrument of manipulation. But those who had experienced it knew otherwise. They felt no pressure, no command, only invitation. The covenant asked nothing except awareness. And yet that awareness was enough to unsettle the world, because those who carried it began to live differently. Acts of compassion multiplied without instruction. Rival groups laid down grudges. Markets paused at noon as strangers prayed together in silence. Even the natural world seemed to respond. Trees bloomed out of season. Migrating birds changed course toward Jerusalem. The 7 voices continued to echo unpredictably, each time followed by new awakenings. A surgeon in New York halted mid-operation when the hum filled the hospital and his patient's failing heart stabilized without intervention. A fisherman in Greece reported that the sea turned glass smooth for a minute, reflecting stars though it was daylight. And in one remote village near the Jordan, an elderly woman who had been blind since birth began to describe seeing light pulsing inside her own heartbeat. When asked what it looked like, she said only, "It looks like remembering." Scientists could not replicate or measure the phenomena. Governments could not control it. And so the story of the seven voices moved beyond religion or science into something else entirely, a shared awareness that the boundaries between heaven and earth had thinned. The covenant was no longer a relic hidden beneath the temple. It had become a living current threading through human consciousness. People realized that the call was not coming from outside them. It was awakening within them, rewriting what it meant to be human. Whether they understood it or not, those who had heard the sound were bound to it now, drawn toward a purpose not yet revealed. And so the prophecy whispered in the ancient texts unfolded in silence, not as thunder from the sky, but as resonance within the heart. The Jerusalem covenant had spoken, and the world had answered. 7 voices across 7 lands had joined into one living chord, and somewhere beneath the temple, the golden plate pulsed once more, as if acknowledging that its message had been received. Under the rising sun, Jerusalem itself seemed transformed. The streets, usually bustling with mundane traffic and commerce, carried an unusual stillness, as if the city sensed that something far greater than its walls or markets had been awakened. Pilgrims, scholars, and ordinary residents alike spoke in hushed tones of a shift that could not be ignored. Those who had witnessed the hum of the 7 voices, who had felt the resonance in their very bones, were no longer passive observers. They had become carriers of a call, witnesses to a covenant that demanded action, reflection, and alignment with a higher purpose. And though governments, scientists, and media tried to contain the narrative, nothing could mute the ripple that now flowed outward from Jerusalem. It was a wave not of sound, but of spiritual awakening, touching hearts across the globe. The call of the covenant, though silent and subtle, was unmistakable to those attuned to its frequency. It was no longer enough to study or discuss. Those called were asked to prepare, to align, and to act in ways that went beyond tradition or routine. Religious leaders across denominations began reporting unprecedented phenomena during prayer, congregations crying out together without prompting, visions of light appearing in quiet moments of meditation, and the inexplicable unity of people from different faiths standing together in reverence. In homes, offices, and schools, ordinary people felt a persistent pull, a gentle yet urgent nudge that reminded them of responsibilities they had long neglected. They were being summoned to embody the principles of the covenant: justice, compassion, reconciliation, and readiness for what was coming next. Throughout Jerusalem, the Temple Mount became the epicenter of this awakening. Scholars and spiritual leaders noted that the golden plate, the artifact at the center of the covenant, seemed to radiate an energy that extended far beyond its physical form. Pilgrims reported that when they approached the plate, they felt a weight in the chest, a warmth in their hands, and a sudden clarity about their purpose in life. Scientists tried to measure it, but instruments recorded only normal readings. It was as if the artifact's true power existed only in the perception of the heart. People began documenting the experience, but each account was unique, emphasizing the personal nature of the covenant. It was calling not just a city or a nation, but every individual who could hear its message. The global response was equally profound. Stories emerged of people halfway across the world experiencing similar awakenings at the exact moment the covenant was revealed. A farmer in India stopped mid-harvest, feeling compelled to help his neighbors. In Brazil, an activist abandoned personal gain to aid refugees. And in Europe, a scientist redirected years of research toward humanitarian projects after a moment of inexplicable clarity. The covenant was not issuing commands, but planting seeds of alignment. Hearts were being tuned to the same frequency, creating a subtle yet undeniable coherence of purpose. Amid the awe and wonder, fear and doubt also surfaced. Many questioned whether the phenomenon was real or a mass psychological event. Some dismissed it as coincidence, while others labeled it a manipulation. Yet even among skeptics, the effects were undeniable. Families reconciled after long estrangements. Communities reached across divides, and the air in Jerusalem and beyond seemed charged with a quiet expectation. The covenant demanded recognition, and those who refused felt a subtle emptiness, as if a silent invitation had passed them by. It became clear that the covenant's purpose was not to impose, but to awaken. Each witness was tasked with a personal responsibility to respond in faith, to prepare, and to carry the light into every sphere of influence. The hum of the 7 voices, the shimmering symbols on the golden plate, and the subtle transformations occurring around the world all pointed to a singular truth. The covenant was active, and those called could no longer remain passive. Spiritual leaders emphasized that readiness was more than physical preparation. It required moral clarity, reconciliation with one's own heart, and alignment with a higher vision. Jerusalem, once the crossroads of history, had become the epicenter of awakening. Every street, every stone, every shadow seemed to vibrate with the energy of the covenant. Pilgrims and residents alike walked with a new awareness, feeling their steps guided by a force that demanded not just observation, but participation. The covenant had revealed itself not as a distant prophecy, but as a living, breathing call, touching every soul it encountered, asking each person to stand awake, aligned, and ready for what was to come. And as the sun set over the ancient city, painting the stones in golden hues that mirrored the artifact itself, the message could be felt in the quiet spaces of the heart. This was no longer a secret. This was a summons. Jerusalem had become the threshold, and the world beyond it would soon follow. Those who had been called could no longer wait. The covenant was alive, and it was asking for their full response. As night fell over Jerusalem, the city seemed suspended between the mundane and the miraculous. The golden plate of the Jerusalem covenant, now illuminated under careful light, radiated a quiet authority, as if reminding everyone who came near that this was no ordinary moment in history. Those who had felt the hum, who had witnessed the 7 voices, who had experienced the subtle call tugging at their hearts, now understood that the covenant's true power was not in the artifact itself, nor in the global phenomena it had sparked, but in the awakening it demanded of each individual. The moment had shifted from revelation to responsibility. This was the hour when hearing the message was no longer enough. Responding was mandatory. Every heartbeat, every breath, every thought became a gauge. Would they answer, or would they remain inert as the world quietly shifted around them? The air in the Temple Mount felt charged, alive, as if the walls themselves had remembered prayers from millennia past and were now holding space for the generations called to this covenant. Pilgrims knelt, not only in awe, but in recognition that their lives would never again belong solely to themselves. Across the city, quiet gatherings formed under the silvered moon. Small groups, strangers at first, came together without instruction, drawn by a shared urgency they could not name. They spoke in whispers about the covenant, about the words inscribed in gold, about the hum that had resonated not in machines, but within their very bones. Teachers, laborers, travelers, and scholars alike shared experiences of sudden clarity, moments of moral reckoning, and impulses to act with compassion where they had previously stood idle. Every story converged on one undeniable truth. The covenant had chosen its witnesses, and those who heard its call were bound to carry it forward. It was not a burden. Though many felt the weight of it, it was a summons, a sacred invitation to align one's life with a vision greater than any one nation, creed, or institution. The covenant demanded action, but not chaos. It called for discernment, To some, the task seemed impossible. How could one individual influence the arc of the world? And yet, those who had truly listened knew that influence did not require power or wealth, but courage and obedience. The acts it asked for were simple in form, yet monumental in effect. To forgive grudges that had hardened hearts for decades. To extend kindness where resentment had grown. To speak truth where silence had allowed injustice to persist. Every small act became a reflection of the covenant, a living seal stamped onto the fabric of reality. Scholars puzzled over the geometric perfection of the symbols etched in gold, while mystics spoke of energy aligning with human will. But the essence was simple. Those who responded faithfully activated the covenant. Those who ignored it left it dormant, a treasure waiting patiently for recognition. In the quietest hours, when the city slept under the weight of history, some of the witnesses returned to the golden plate. They pressed their palms to its surface, closed their eyes, and felt the hum resonate within them, now unmistakably connected to their own life force. And in that resonance, a message formed not in words, but in certainty. The covenant would not work through force, nor through fear, but through those willing to carry its light willingly. Every hesitation, every moment of doubt, could be transformed into action, for the covenant thrived not on belief alone, but on participation. To act, to align, to awaken others, this was its living seal written not in ink or gold, but in human hearts. News of the covenant's awakening spread slowly, but inevitably. Communities once divided by conflict and ideology began to report small miracles of cooperation, reconciliation, and unexpected generosity. Families reunited in ways that had long seemed impossible. Strangers saved lives without recognition or reward. Even nature seemed to participate. Barren fields bore sudden shoots, rivers reflected sunsets in unprecedented brilliance, and migratory birds altered their paths toward the city in patterns that mirrored the ancient symbols. These were not signs meant to awe, but to confirm the covenant was active, and the world itself would respond when human hearts answered its call. And now, as the night deepened and Jerusalem's streets were emptied of the curious and the pilgrim alike, the covenant's final appeal became clear. It is not for all, nor will it awaken everyone at once. But those who have been called, those who feel a stirring deep in their soul, a recognition they cannot name, must act without delay. The covenant is neither prophecy nor promise alone. It is a living contract, demanding alignment between will, heart, and action. For those who respond, there is participation in the unfolding of a purpose that spans continents and generations, a role in a story far greater than any single human life. And for those who ignore it, the opportunity remains. But it fades with every passing moment of inattention, every refusal to align with the call. In the final hour, witnesses across the world knelt in silence, feeling the hum return for one last lingering resonance. Some wept, others stood rigid with awe, all aware that the moment of choice had arrived. The golden plate glowed faintly under the protective glass, a beacon that was both invitation and challenge, radiating the silent words, "Act now, align now, awaken now." Those who understood knew that their response would not only define their own lives, but contribute to a larger awakening, the fulfillment of a covenant written long before they were born, now finding expression through their obedience. And in the stillness beneath the ancient sky of Jerusalem, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the hearts of the chosen to answer, to carry the seal of the covenant forward, and to ensure that the message, once heard, would never be forgotten, but lived fully and faithfully in every act of love, courage, and awakening that followed.